Yeah, good morning, Saints. We're going to start a little series on power of the gospel. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the promise out of Genesis 3:15 about the promise of a prolonged war. And if you remember, our pastor many years ago did a series, a gospel before the gospel. In fact, the first sermon was the promise of a prolonged war. And in there, you'll see in Genesis 3:15 where God tells the woman that your seed will crush the head of the serpent, and the serpent will bruise his heel. And what happens when Adam and Eve sinned? You remember in Genesis chapter 2, God says, the day you eat of it, you shall surely die. Well, God had a choice. When they sinned, he could do one of two things. He could show mercy, or he could show justice. And the justice was that they had to die. Well, they showed justice that day. He showed mercy that day. And maybe Satan tempted Adam and Eve in order to put God in the corner, in order to say to God, listen, if you show them mercy, maybe you'll have to show me mercy. Not that Satan wanted to change, mind you. He was going to keep doing what he was doing. But at least God wouldn't destroy him. Maybe that's what he was thinking. And so for these thousands of years, from the time of the fall until the cross, this little question hung over God's head. You weren't just, God. Or you were merciful, but you weren't just. Well, a just God is very important in restoring justice in an unjust world. And so this question is answered at Calvary. This is where we're going to go to next, as we talk about what God is doing. But it's interesting here that God stops everything in its tracks when man sins. As soon as man sinned, there was a Savior. And as soon as man sinned, God had begun to provide a way in order to restore all things. It's like he's saying to Adam and Eve, we're going to continue the battle so it has a positive outcome. And Genesis 3:15 begins with this promise of a prolonged war, a war against Satan. You see, mankind joined Satan in the war against God. We picked up weapons and we were on his side. And not until we become reunited with God do we lay our weapons down. And so this promise of a prolonged war is really our hope. And as being sinners, God had every right to vanquish us. But what we see in the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, is God doing all things to restore all things, mainly you and me. And that's the promise of the prolonged war. So as you go out into the world today, think about that. There's a battle going on in which we're a part of. But hopefully, we've changed sides. And in this battle, God becomes victor and things are restored. Don't let the darkness that threatens the world today threaten you in your calling to give God's message to the world as we go out and be lights in the world today. Blessings.